There's a truth crisis in America, and I worry that if something isn't done about it soon, the consequences will be severe. I'm John with My Crazy World, and what a crazy world it's becoming. Over the last 20 years or so, we have seen an ever increasing amount of ignorance in America, accompanied by a lack of accountability and a dwindling level of common sense. Our metaphorical train has derailed, so let's see if we can figure out what went wrong and if we can fix it. Before that, though, all the disclaimers. I'm not a sociology or constitutional law expert. For the sake of liability, I'm not an expert in anything, not even being myself. These are just my opinions based off of evidence I can find and my own experiences. Let's start with truth, something that is severely lacking lately. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, truth is defined as the body of real things, events, and facts. A judgment, proposition, or idea that is true or accepted as true, the body of true statements and propositions, the property of being in accord with fact or reality. I've highlighted words in this definition such as real, facts, true, and reality, for these are the fundamental ideas that are slipping away, and our way of life is slipping away with them. Truth is a necessity, not a convenience. In fact, the truth can be very inconvenient at times, yet truth is vital for the prosperity of societies and the success of most endeavors. Having a common set of widely known truths that the vast majority of people understand allows us to interact at a reasonable level and work to get towards common goals. We can converse, work together, debate, compromise, come to agreements, or just agree to disagree. Not everyone is going to have the same point of view all the time, but as long as we're being truthful and rational, we have the ability to function for the betterment of society. Truth grounds us in reality and keeps us from thinking we live in a fantastical world of make-believe where our delusions and impulses are somehow real to ourselves and therefore must be real for others as well. Yet many of the problems we have today is that there are so many people that just don't care about the truth. A large portion of society just waves away the truth and says it doesn't matter. They don't care if they're wrong. You better respect their opinion. They say they have their truth. No, what they have is biases, preconceptions, and a lack of knowledge and understanding which precludes them from making educated decisions and make any sort of rational sense. That's fine as long as they aren't interacting with anyone else, and as long as the consequences of their actions won't negatively affect an innocent person. As long as you aren't trying to convince anyone that your feelings and delusions somehow should override reality and truth, enjoy your fantasy and feel free to live in your own little world. But we all know that isn't the case in today's America. Today, we are all forced to live in a world reminiscent of the children's story, The Emperor's New Clothes. In the story, the emperor was deceived by a tailor who convinced him that he had ultra sheer clothing that was exotic, yet invisible and unable to be felt. In reality, there were no clothes. Everyone who came in contact with the emperor, undressed as he was, had to play along with this fraud, because you surely don't want to get on the bad side of a powerful emperor and suffer his wrath. So no one pointed out the truth to him. We now live in a world where the emperor's clothes are ideologies that often aren't based in truth, but if you speak out against them, you will upset the angry little emperors, and you will feel their wrath. The attacks come in many forms that we are all too familiar with: name-calling, censorship, deplatforming, banning, doxing, and harassment. But we have the freedom of speech in this country, and there's many reasons for it. The freedom of speech allows people's voices to be heard, whether they are rich or poor, young or old, Democrat or Republican. Not only does the freedom of speech allow us to express our discontent with the government without them stopping us, it allows us to speak out against foreign governments, businesses, and yes, other people as well. Opposing parties are supposed to be allowed to voice their opinions, and whoever has the best reasoning on their side, the most compelling argument, will gain the support of the people and come out on top. Intellect, decency, and sense will rise to the top when given the chance. People cherish their own free speech. One has to look no further than the recent riots, where people claimed that assaulting people and looting was somehow protected by free speech, to understand that somehow people think the constitutional right is some sort of superpower that gives them an invincibility mode, like in a video game. The hypocrisy that many of these very same people are so eager to deny other people their true freedom of speech after they blatantly break laws and try to invoke the freedom of speech as protection for themselves is disgusting. By the way, committing crimes is not protected by the Bill of Rights, and I really need to do a video on constitutional rights sooner than later. Yet censorship, deplatforming, doxing, and harassment attempts to circumvent this right. These are tools frequently used to silence people who have a valid and factual point to make that the opposing side knows they can't refute with facts and counterpoints. So their strategy instead is to silence the other party, deny them the right to make their point, rob the rest of society the ability to hear both sides and make their own informed decision. This amounts to a digital dictatorship where you have no freedom of speech. You only get to voice an opinion as long as it falls within what other people want you to say or some unquantified, vague community guidelines. Now, I completely understand that social media companies are owned by corporations and don't need to abide by free speech principles. They're free to make their own decisions and reap the rewards or consequences of their actions as users and ad revenue come and go. But that definitely doesn't make it okay for them to censor people, especially when they can skew the outcomes of elections just by having bias in which posts they allow or not. If you're okay with the government, be it government agencies or elected politicians requesting social media companies to censor people and news stories in a clear violation of freedom of speech, you're definitely part of the problem. Technically, the First Amendment only states, Congress shall pass no law abridging the freedom of speech or the press. However, the interpretation of the First Amendment goes much further than that. Government representatives silencing citizens is a violation of the First Amendment right, even if they do it through a third-party cutout. Donald Trump tried to get Twitter to block a person from posting negative things on his account, but courts ruled it's a violation of the First Amendment. And that wasn't even trying to ban the person. I'm still waiting for the repercussions against Adam Schiff, AOC, and the FBI for their censorship efforts online. But that would mean we actually still had a government of the people, by the people, for the people, instead of a ruling class of politicians that are clearly above the people. Hopefully you noticed the "or the press" part of the First Amendment quote. Once again, Congress can't pass any laws restricting the press, but the interpretation of this is that the press can do almost anything and the government can't stop them. During the Trump presidency, there was a lot of fear-mongering about how Trump was censoring the media and violating the First Amendment after he revoked a CNN reporter's White House press credentials. He was sued by CNN on the grounds of violating the First and Fifth Amendments, but you'll note that Congress still hadn't passed any laws. The outcome of the lawsuit was that the judge ruled the White House can kick reporters out, but it needs to warn them in writing and give them a chance to respond first. But after all that we've heard about the sanctity of the dire need for a free press, untouched by the government, the press has had no issue doing the bidding of the government when it comes to amplifying some narratives that are completely false, like the origins of an unspecified virus that censorship still keeps us from talking freely about, while suppressing other stories that were completely true, like a certain presidential son's laptop. Indeed, it seems the press thinks the point of having a free press is so they can wield influence and power in whatever manner they choose, rather than for them to report facts with a reasonable level of accuracy to inform the public. Sadly, the days of Walter Cronkite with factual, unbiased reporting have all but disappeared. We are definitely not better off for it. Once again, they're restricting your ability to know the truth. They're putting on a set of blinders. You don't get to see all or even most of the facts. So you don't get to make an educated opinion off all the relevant data. Unless you go digging for facts yourself, then they call you a conspiracy theorist, because why not insult anyone who doesn't want the garbage you're trying to give them? Just conform and consume already. They want you to arrive at the only decision you can possibly make based off the carefully selected, screened, and manipulated information they allow you to see. This is not a press worth having. So far, we have people who don't care about the truth, and others censoring people, both in person and through social media. We have social media companies censoring people and news stories that don't suit their agenda. Then we have the news media censoring what gets reported and how it gets reported. Lastly, we have our government violating citizens' freedom of speech by censoring and deplatforming through proxy, using social media companies as well as working with news companies to control what information citizens get to begin with. Truth is not just getting suppressed, it's getting executed. At this rate, it won't be long before we don't even have a notion of the concept of what truth was even supposed to be. We all have a duty to the truth. As I said earlier, it is the foundation on which societies are able to communicate effectively with each other. While it isn't always easy, I would rather know the unpleasant truth than a comforting lie any day. For at least I would be dealing with the facts and reality instead of a delusion that won't fix anything but can surely lead to major problems. So how do we fix this? How do we preserve our freedom of speech? How do we renew our ability to have truthful conversations that are based in reality? Can we bring back decency and understanding from differing viewpoints back to our society, rather than suppression and hostility towards anyone who doesn't say exactly our own thoughts from their mouths? The key, in my opinion, is accountability. Be accountable to yourself for not only thinking you know the truth, but put in the due diligence to make sure you are correct. It starts here, but it doesn't end here. Others need to be held accountable. The entities that withhold the truth, lie about it, or suppress the truth need to be held accountable as well. Doxing people in order to silence, intimidate, and harass them so you can deprive them of their freedom of speech is one of the most despicable uses of the internet to become prevalent lately. While the federal government has been slow to address this issue, several state legislators have proposed laws within their states. Washington State passed House Bill 1335 in April of 2023, which prohibits individuals from publicly disclosing personally identifiable information with the intent to harass, intimidate, or otherwise cause harm. Cheers to them. With the amount of doxing that is occurring lately, I think the federal government needs to also pass legislation in regards to this. Since being a recent phenomenon, it generally isn't expressly against the law in many states, hence why so many people dox with impunity. If you also think this should be fixed, contact your state representative. Go to www.house.gov/representatives/find-your-representative. Put in your address and it'll give you the contact info for your congressional rep. Speaking of representatives in the government and accountability, we might as well address holding those who tried to censor and deplatform American citizens, thereby inhibiting their freedom of speech, accountable. While you are communicating with your representative about anti-doxing legislation, let them know you also want consequences for the representatives and agencies involved in limiting Americans' right to free speech. Congress has the ability to censure other members, which is simply a reprimand, but it's a rare punishment and it is better than simply doing nothing. It's about accountability. Those representatives also have the ability to call the leaders of government agencies in front of Congress to testify. FBI leadership needs to testify in front of Congress as well to answer for the FBI's stifling of Americans' freedom of speech by directing Twitter to deplatform and restrict people. Twitter collected almost $3.5 million from the FBI, which is really taxpayer money, as reimbursement for the amount of time Twitter spent processing the FBI's request between October of 2019 and February of 2021, right during the last presidential election cycle. That is a lot of time censoring people. At $60 an hour, that is about 58,000 hours of Twitter going through and censoring people for the FBI. That's absolutely disgusting. Fair and balanced elections with maybe a little finger on the scale just to make sure you get your way. Answers need to be forthcoming, as does accountability. As for news companies and social media, the best way to make them accountable is to put them on blast publicly when they censor the truth or try to lie. Use your freedom of speech to make people aware of the lies they're being fed. There's been a lot of fallout lately for many of these entities as their deceit and manipulations have come to light. Between the circumstances behind the unnamed virus of unknown origin that originally randomly happened and the treatments for it, the laptop, the denials of censorship with proof otherwise, blatant double standards, and numerous other lies and gaslighting endeavors, the credibility of news organizations and social media companies are at an all-time low. While they've tried to bend the people to their will for years, other alternatives have begun to grow. So if you get to the point of irreconcilable differences with your news sources or social media of choice, disconnect from that toxic relationship and find a new one. This hits them in their profits. As their user base declines, so does their revenue, and it also helps the entities that are trying to fix the problem. For news, instead of the mainstream media here in the US with its spin, consider trying ProPublica or the Reuters United States section. Reuters also has excellent world news, and ProPublica offers stories of excellent investigative journalism that actually has consequences for the wrongdoers they investigate. They are what reporting should be. As for social media alternatives, there's no shortage of alternatives out there. Whether you can find one that suits your needs is up to you. Mainstream ones definitely have the lion's share of people on them, and if you're trying to be social with your friends and family, you're pretty much forced to go wherever they are. But social media is purely optional and is even declining in the 18 to 29-year-old age group, according to Pew Research, down to 84% from 90% a few years ago. Just remember, you don't need it. If it's more of a negative than a positive, just stop using it. Circling back to the people who don't care about the truth but only care about their feelings or their reality, some people you just can't help. And you have to know when to cut the dead weight. Forcing someone who doesn't want the truth to care about it is an exercise in futility. As the adage goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. The best we can do is start making the truth be a requirement, not an option. Hold people and entities accountable when they diminish the truth. Always do your best to make sure that you know the truth and speak it. You won't always be right, but no one is. Take it as a learning experience and make the best out of it. But we need to get back to the truth and reality in this country, and we need to do it immediately. People hiding behind feelings as a way to suppress facts and truth or to deny other people their ability to speak has gone too far. Our country is designed to work under the principle of free speech, and yet that has been rapidly eroded in recent years. If we don't act now, don't be surprised when there is no semblance of free speech left. I know this has been a bit of a heavy topic, but it's one I felt really needed to be talked about. Thanks for hanging in there, and please like, share, and subscribe if you agree. Thanks.